Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Rohit from IMED. I can see people are starting to arrive to the webinar, so I appreciate your time today. I'm going to get started. This is going to be a recorded session too, so that we can share this with everyone, for those who can join a little bit later too as well. So first of all, thank you for your time and your interest in the webinar. IMED is an organization that has been in discussions with AstraZeneca and Alexion for a good year at least, and maybe before that as well. Now, more recently, the discussions have warmed up just because of the various initiatives that you have on the table and the ways we can support you. And then these discussions are kind of not just based in Spain, where we are located, but on a global basis as well. So we felt this was the perfect time to put together a webinar to inform you of all the discussions, but also give you an insight on what IMED's mission is, the way we can achieve that mission through the platform that we have, and then go to some of the use cases that we've been able to resolve, which are very relevant to both the use cases that are on the table with AstraZeneca and also the therapeutic areas that we've been supporting as well. So without further ado, let me get this started with our first speaker. Just before I go to that, by the way, just to give you a format, we will have a chat. There's a questions tab on the right for you to be able to ask all your questions throughout the session. The way we would like to conduct this is for you to allow you to have as many questions as you want there. We'll go through as many as possible by the end of the session. And we will start with a couple of intros into our mission and our platform, and then give you some use cases and demo. Those will be done by Matt, myself, and Gabby. And then we'll open it up for questions at the end. Okay. We have got some extra things to share with you at the end of this webinar as well. So that's going to be the format. So with that, let me hand it over to someone that AstraZeneca won't be this familiar with, or unfamiliar with. So Matt's someone who spent a huge amount of time at both AstraZeneca and the previous organizations to AstraZeneca, which came through with acquisition. We thought it would be the ideal way to get insights from the inside and the outside. He is our scientific advisor. So over to you, Matt, just to open the session up.
Thank you very much, Ro. So welcome all of you on this webinar on transforming patient recruitment with AI and the power of unstructured data. So I'm really excited to be back at AstraZeneca now as a scientific advisor. And with my last 15 years in AstraZeneca, I was devoted to lead EHR related services and also integrating health data platforms like Trinetics. I was also the business owner of Trinetics. Today, we introduce IMED Health Data Platform, which is a complementary tool to Trinetics. And it's designed to enhance, among other things, but specifically for the interest of AstraZeneca, to enhance patient recruitment by actually harnessing unstructured data. Through a deep hospital collaboration, this platform has building exciting evidence of successfully uncovered patients previously overlooked by the traditional feasibility assessment, which actually demonstrating the power of unstructured data in clinical research. So IMED platform is a complement as we see it. Next slide. So just to kick off with, the volume of digitized healthcare data globally is actually staggering. With the estimate is that with over 2.3 exabytes generated, and that is, by the way, equivalent to 1.2 billion high definition films, which would take you 3 million years to look at. So that sort of is staggering. However, much of these real world data remains underutilized, which is a great potential. A key distinction exists between structured and unstructured data. And give you some examples, only 20 to 30% of healthcare data is actually structured. that is parts of EHR, lab results, and billing, while 70 to 80% is unstructured. Sort of that is a different kind of physical notes and imaging and other genomics aspects. In contrast, clinical trials data rely on much more higher level of structured data, 50 to 80%, depending on the strict regulation that is contrasting that. Understanding this is crucial, as structured data alone sometimes fails to capture the full patient profile, underscoring that, and it's quite exciting, the importance of AI-driven solution in patient recruitment. So while saying that is that rely on structured data, because structured data will always be king, but we are facing a tremendous opportunity to use the other unstructured data to further complement and sharpen the lens of finding patients. Next slide. Talking about access challenges. Despite the vast healthcare data availability, access remains at a significant challenge. Barriers include data fragmentation, interoperability issues, standardization and regulatory constraints. Hospital and research institutions struggle to effectively use unstructured data for clinical insights and patient recruitment. Traditional methods relying solely on structured data often or sometimes exclude eligible patients. And here's where the sort of the AI-powered solutions like IOMED's platform can bridge and support that process of finding a more precise patient identification. Overcoming access challenge is essential for maximizing real-world data potential, streamlining recruitment, and ultimately advancing precision medicine by integrating both structured and unstructured data sources. It's not going to be easy, but it has a very interesting prospect. Next slide. A little bit on EHDS from a European perspective. The European Health Data Space EHDS is a transformative initiative aimed at enabling secure cross-border health data sharing across Europe. It's really a brave undertaking. Expected to be fully operational in 2026, EHDS promotes interoperability and accelerate drug discovery and enhance patient empowerment. And a key focus is unlocking unstructured data. That is to say, the different kind of medical notes and imaging reports that make up so large percentage of health data. Leveraging AI and natural language processing and standardized models like OMOP, EHD aims to bridge data silos to make this possible. And of course, EHDS, that kind of data sharing is going to be a federated government model. And as such, depends on multi-stakeholder collaboration to drive innovation and improve healthcare and reposition Europe as a leader of health data utilization. Next slide. So from an initiative to regulation, now progressing with full regulatory implement by 2026, EHDS focus on standardizing access of both structured and unstructured data. And as you can see here, there are some different initiatives that has been launched. And Odyssey, that role we'll talk a little bit more about, has been sort of a foundational role for making use of real-world data. But also Eden, which I remember in my time as well in AstraZeneca, was that AstraZeneca has actively contributed to Eden, which taking OMOP into a quite exciting plus 100 million OMOP standardized EHR records, but also Darwin, like further enhanced regulatory decision-making that leads to the EHDS. This is quite an interesting journey, and I think the coordinates are clear how to make this possible. And AstraZeneca engagement underscores the commitment to real-world evidence and an AI-driven patient recruitment through platforms like IOMED. So next slide. So with that, I will now handing over to you, Ro.
Thanks, Mats, and thanks for giving that backdrop. So IAMED, what we have is the IAMED Data Space Platform. It's a healthcare platform very much aligned to the goals of the European Health Data Space, which really is to provide very high-level structured data for use, for secondary use in a very compliant fashion. Next slide. Okay, so what is the platform? So within the platform, what we're trying to do is resolve a need for getting access to data. On the one hand, IAMED, we're working very closely with our data holder partners, our hospital partners, to enable the data. We then create a federated network of these hospitals that we have partnered with very strategically to activate the data. And then within the same platform, we're allowing the industry, so people like AstraZeneca, to come in and then query the data that's available across that federated network. So we label these things as enablement, really partnering with the data holders, and then we're having the mediation between the data holders and the data users. And these are specific terms that we've used just to align very much with the roles that are defined within the European health data space as well. So what do we mean by enablement? We have a very strategic and deep relationship with the hospital partners. So we are never really going to the hospitals just for a subset of data for a specific project. We can do that, but we think the value for the partnerships that we have with the hospitals can be much broader and much more strategic. So within the hospitals, what we're doing is we're mapping access to all data that they can give us. Typically, this is EHR or EMR systems. There'll be pharmacy databases, laboratories, databases, etc. And we're structuring that to a data standard which is called OMOP, the OMOP Common Data Model, really initiated by the Odyssey. And the thing we do really kind of differently here is that we're not just trying to structure map data to the OMOP so that it becomes useful patient-level data with a 360 view of the patient for you. So it's structured in a way where you can start to query a lot of information about the patients. We're doing that from unstructured data sets as well. So this is where we use AI to support the extraction of and review of data from a contextual and a content perspective to get the same unstructured data into OMOP as well. So it's a very strategic relationship, and this is what we're really building within each hospital. The data that we provide or the data that we map into the OMOP is actually held within the walls of the hospital. So it is true federated access in that sense, and everything that we then access is only done with the approval of the hospitals itself. So, not to get into the details here, but just to give you an understanding of why this relationship is so strong, we're preparing the hospital for accessing that data from various angles. We're providing readiness from a technical standpoint, just making sure that the data activation for more hospital sources is possible. We're looking at the AI readiness as well. So we're bringing the tool sets that we have to then apply it to the data that we're having there, so that we can start to provide you that deep view of the data for each hospital. The mediation readiness is a very important part. This is where we're really agreeing with the hospitals that we are going to have an ongoing established partnership in which we are going to prepare this data for the use by the industry, but making sure that that's done in a compliant fashion, and also making sure there's a workflow between all parties involved to make sure that there's transparency between how that data is prepared and what it's going to be used for. And as part of that, that's where part of the compliance side is making sure that the data is anonymized and that we have the correct procedures contracted to be able to work like this. Now, before I go into the space mediation, I was just one thing that I wanted to highlight was, so in many of the conversations I've had with both Alexion and AstraZeneca, the question has been, okay, so what happens if we wanted to work with a hospital outside the federated network that you have? And I think that's a good question. There's multiple approaches for us to be able to access the data. OMOP is a common data standard that's been deployed to over 3,500 hospitals and registries globally. So anything that's structured in OMOP and in hospitals is something that we could work with and access. The things that we can bring value to within those OMOPs is the extra NLP layer that we have to get to the clinical notes as well. So we've already demonstrated working with hospitals, together with our federated networks, as well as ones outside the federated networks across different countries to deliver projects as well. So I just wanted to highlight that fact because I know it's front of mind for a lot of the people that might be joining this session today as well. Now, from a data space mediation standpoint, what we're really doing within the platform is bringing together the data holders and the data users to leverage this data that we're providing. Okay, so it's all within the same platform. The hospitals actually have access to this platform as well, so they are actually accessing this platform to understand both the data that's being prepared, but also understand and receive the queries that are coming from the industry. So this is really the value of the whole platform. It really digitalizes the whole process between having the data prepared and then having that data requested from the industry as well. So what are we offering AstraZeneca and Alexion really is high quality data. So within this mediation, you've got high quality data across that federated network and beyond as well. You're working within an infrastructure that's compliant. So the data is fully anonymized, and there's an end-to-end mediation process where all the approvals that we would then have with the ethics committee, with the hospitals, if it's patient level data that's required, that process is in place. Again, back to my earlier comment around trying to help you have access to data faster. And that's not just about enabling the data on the one side, but it's making sure that you've got the framework for approving that data for the use of the projects as well. Now, the platform also allows you to then become self-users have a self-service approach to this as well. So it doesn't have to be something that you do through IOMED. Really, we want to facilitate you to be able to come into the platform and do all the queries that you wish, having patient counts, having requests for data for specific projects, et cetera, et cetera. So again, that brings transparency to the users and the flow of the data and the requests going through all the different parties that I've previously mentioned as part of the data space enablement and mediation. It facilitates the request, approval, and delivery of the data. So that's effectively what we're doing through the platform. Now, when we go into the mediation, you'll see that there's going to be different levels of offerings that we have. So we have a data catalog. This really helps you to navigate the repository of real-world data that we have. It allows you to perform patient counts, and this has kind of been the most common request that we've been receiving for the initial discussions as well, just to perform some high-level quick feasibilities for the different projects that you're considering. You can also generate complex aggregated data analysis across the data holders that we have through the aggregated patient characterization solution. And then we can go to patient level data as well. So you can have characterizations, journeys, specific cohorts of data that you're requesting very deep level patient specific information from. And that would work through the mediation process to ensure that the ethics committee approval is also okay with that, and then we provide that to you in the format of an OMOP database as well. Lastly, I've put the patient finder there. Again, this is one of probably the most recurring conversation with AstraZeneca and Alexion, just to support with the types of projects that you're getting into, to flag patients, to find patients with specific selection criteria, and we'll start to look at that a little bit later within the platform. And help you recruit faster or find patients for specific treatments to target that in a more efficient way as well. So those are the solutions that we offer through the mediation. And then kind of those solutions are there to enable the data to come through for addressing the different use cases that you might have. So I've listed here, some of the common use cases that we can support. Very much around disease understanding, running retrospective observational studies. We've highlighted patient identification here simply because that's the key topic of the conversations today, but also the key topic of the conversations that we're maintaining with folks from AstraZeneca and Alexion. Diagnosis support, outcomes-based agreements. So these are the types of use cases for which the data is being used. And I just wanted to highlight and kind of almost map those use cases to the kind of use case discussions that we've had so far. Now, this isn't an exhaustive list, but I just wanted to kind of bring the people on this call together so that you understand from the different departments within AstraZeneca, the types of requests that are coming through. So detecting patients who meet the criteria for BRCA tests, qualifying diagnosed patients for high risk of chronic kidney disease, CKD, finding patients for rare disease. Now, these were things that were investigated. And then the alert system for rare disease, which I think is the most interesting topic to continue discussions with across the board, where we actively flagging patients for certain cohorts to the PI so that they can have real-time alerts for when a patient meets predefined criteria for recruitment. So I just wanted so that's a bit of a highlight on the platform, just an overview on the platform, how it comes together, how we engage with the hospitals, the types of use cases we are offering. And so let me hand it over now to Gabby to show you more about the platform itself.
Thank you, Rohit. Thank you, Mats. So I think that one of the most interesting features of the platform is the capability of really accessing this huge amount of data, thanks to the scalability that AI is providing to us. For any of us that have ever been just trying to recruit patients in the hospital, or as I have been, for example, just trying to fill out all the data necessary to be part of a retrospective study, at the end, we spend a huge amount of time trying to collect all those data points that in reality, most of them, they are already present in the existing systems in the hospital. So this is where AI really shows its real potential, on that it doesn't get tired of going through patient after patient, document after document, for being able to find those data points that at the end they are going to tell us if this patient had this kind of disease or another one, if they went through these therapeutic lines, if they have this regimen of whatever treatments that they had, or if they were having a bad time at a given point. So that's where the AI can really grow through all the network of hospitals and find all those patients that might fulfill the selection criteria and their data of interest. At the end, what I like to think about the platform is as a way of what we are doing is transforming all the data that it's available in all these different hospitals, that at the end it's data that it's being collected just for being able, for the sake of representing the processes of the hospital, and try to make it patient-centric. Just try to define what the patient's data is by putting the patient in the center and making sure that all the data points, all those processes, all those procedures, all those treatments that the patient went through, they are very well structured, and that they are in a place where we can really then query for it and find these data points. So I just wanted to give a brief showcase of how this AI works. I think that one of the most important things whenever we work with AI is trying to understand the reality of the tasks that the AI is performing, so that then we can really question the quality and make sure that it's performing the task that we are aiming for. So the tasks that we're expecting from the AI is the extraction of the data. So we have this many systems in each hospital. We are expecting from 7 to 10 different information systems in the hospital. One might be the EHR, the other one might be the laboratory, the other one might be the pharmacy. And we have all this data that it's scattered all around the hospital. So first finding all this information, then making sure that it's representing the same data points, because we might have had one data point coming from one hospital that we are able to extract. But if we are working with a network for hospitals and we're working with, for example, 15 different institutions, we need to normalize the data. We need to make sure that whenever we are referring to a headache, we are referring with the same ID, we are referring to it with the same semantics. And this is the second task that the AI does it. And then what it does is it checks ourselves. It checks for the quality. It makes sure that all the patterns that it has extracted, it really makes sense, and that all the data has been extracted at scale. So if we imagine any kind of EHR, we can imagine the first AI going for the structured data on the left. So the idea about going about the structured data is that we might have all the weight of all the patients, but we have a network of hospitals. So we may need to make sure that all the data has been mapped into the same kind of ID to be able to represent that weight in the same way in each of those different hospitals. So thanks to the enablement process that we saw before with Rohit, what we are able to do is to make sure that we are representing that weight that we are seeing in the left with the same concept ID in each of the different hospitals, so that whenever that we want to query for all the weights that the patients had at a certain given moment, then we can make sure that all across the network, all the data was already normalized, and that we can already start consuming the data. The second AI, what it does is goes through all the clinical notes and performs a very similar task, but where the end goal is to be able to find not just one endpoint, but many, many of them. So for example, all the diseases, all the procedures, all the different treatments that the patients might have gone through. So this is the first AI. As we see, the task it's quite complex, because at the end, every system, every hospital has different ways of representing its ID. So we have this auto mapping model where this AI it's able, thanks to the context of the patient and thanks to the context of the data that it's checking, understand what kind of data it's referring to, and then make sure it's storing it, it's computing it into a normalized way of storing the data with this concept ID. This task at the end, when you repeat it in many, many places, and you see every of these different hospitals that has these different IDs, we end up having a normalized database all across the different sites on the network. Regarding the NLP, the task is exactly the same. Here what we have is an AI that what it's able to do is to perform the same kind of task that any physician will do when it's trying to fulfill an ECRF, that it's going through all the clinical notes, read them, find those data points, understand the data point by itself, and then record it to make sure that we have find out that data point about that patient. In this case, for example, what we are seeing is that AI has been able to find that the patient had a pain in the left arm, but it's going to store that event in a normalized way, making sure that rather than the language, the way we wrote it, the acronyms that we might be using, we are representing that data point in the same exact way. So this is the main goal of this second AI, and that's where the power of AI really shines, because I'm showing just one example here for the pain in the left arm, but this task is going to be repeated for every data point in every text in every patient in the network. So at the end, we're going to end up that for this person ID 243, we have the pain in the left arm, but we're going to be able also to find the acute myocardial infarction or the EKG or any other kind of procedures that these patients have gone through. At the end, this process of finding all these different data points, it's important, because at the end is what is going to give us the baseline for being able to understand what has happened to the patient into a much deeper level that if we just rely on structured information. But we need some other information, such as understanding how these concepts relate between them. So when did the pain start? where was the pain located, if something happened with the pain itself, in this case that it was treated, if it's, in this case, for example, something that it happened in the past. So we need to understand if it's something that has happened during this clinical visit, or we're referring to something that happened in another moment. So for example, in this same clinical note, we are referring that this patient already had a similar pain in the past, and this acute myocardial infarction is not happening right now, but what the physician is referring that had happened in the past. So it's very important not only to find those data points, but also to be able to understand the context underlying and being able to understand all the semantics behind them. So when we refer to the semantics, we refer to positive and negative mentions. Many times what we find on the clinical notes is that we negate maybe a patient that doesn't have a pain in the left arm. So it's important to find the pain in the left arm, but it's also as important to know that it's been negated, that what is being said is that it's a negative data point. Same if we are referring to events that might have happened in another moment or things that might not be certain. For example, many times on the clinical notes, we find that physicians, what we do is we share the plan, what we are going to do with the patients, what is going to be handled with them. So this is important also to understand if we're referring with certainty to this data point or with uncertainty. Or, for example, if it refers to the patient. This is a classic example where many times on the EHR data, we are referring that maybe someone from their family, from the second or third grade family member, they have gone through a cancer process, but we are not saying that the patient themselves has gone through a patient cancer. So being able to differentiate all those different data points and being able to understand all that context so that we provide the correct identification, it's the whole work of this AI, and to do it at the scale is what really provides the whole value for being able to capture all the data of interest. So without further delay, what I want to share with you is the experience on how to be able to perform this process of just defining the patients or the cohort of interest, the data of interest themselves, and being able to access to it. So let me share with you my screen, and I will share the process itself. So can you confirm now that you're able to see my screen? Yes?
Yeah, yes, we can. Yeah. Thanks, Gary.
So, so here what we are seeing is the live platform from IOMED. Here what we are seeing is two of the many applications we have. So today, as Rohit has mentioned, we've been focusing on the data mediations. So the data mediations are performed by performing or executing data orders themselves. A data orders is just the definition of what it will be our study. And the data order, it starts by defining what kind of data solution we are interested on. So as Rohit mentioned previously, we might be interested in understanding how many patients there are that fulfill a selection criteria. Maybe we want to find who those patients are. Maybe we need to be able to access to that data at the patient level so that we can understand and have a much more bigger understanding of the data. Or maybe sometimes we don't want to deal with the data management itself because we just want to be able to answer an insight or get an insight from the data, but we don't want to handle all the management of the data. So we might be interested in a patient aggregated characterization. So for example, we could start defining our own data order and say that we might be interested in something like, for example, the psoriasis, and we might want to find all the patients that have psoriasis. For the sake of brevity, I'm going to open already a project that it's been already defined so that we can go a little bit faster. So in this data order, what we are going to see is the whole process to be able to access to the data itself. So the first part of it is going to be defining which are the clinical centers that we want to take part of this mediation. So then we can go to the platform and select all the different hospitals that can take part of the mediation processes. We can select the hospitals. We can even select which are the principal investigators that are behind of the hospital that might participate in our study. So let's just add an example for being able to add those hospitals that we might be interested on. Once we have defined the hospitals, we have to define the data itself. So for example, in this case, we will be interested on measuring the psoriasis severity. So let's imagine that our end goal is to understand if a treatment by itself, so for example, if the treatment with ixekizumab and secukinumab, that are two immunomodulators, can help with the management of psoriasis as a disease by itself. So the first thing that we will have to do is just to define the data of interest. So for example, we will want to define how we are going to define psoriasis by itself and say that we want some of the psoriasis, because if we will go into all the different kinds, there are more than 43 different subtypes of psoriasis by themselves, and also the treatments and with which granularity we want for those treatments. Once we have defined the centers, the data of interest, then we can start defining the cohort. So which are going to be the selection criteria that define the cohort of interest by itself. So here what we are going to is define which are the entry events, those events that are going to define the cohort that I'm going to be working with. So for example, in this case, we will be working with any patient that had a drug exposure into ixekizumab or into secukinumab, and that they might have other inclusion criteria, such as, for example, having had another treatments, or maybe having psoriasis diagnosis that it has happened before or after another condition. So this interface, what it lets us is to define the complexity of the selection of the cohort of interest. And at that point, what we will do is just make a submission to be able to access to the data. At that moment, all the hospitals will start receiving the notification that someone is interested in executing a study, that it has this kind of characteristics, and the hospitals themselves will start accepting the mediations. So at any given point, when these hospitals have accepted the mediations, we will be able to start accessing the data as soon as one hospital has accepted the mediation themselves. Once the mediation is accepted, then we will be able to access to the data itself. So if you give me one moment, that I have to open on the other laptop, and I'm gonna fake an approval for this demo so that we can see the whole process, if I can. Okay, so now that we have approved our study and that it's delivery ready, then we will be able to access to our deliverable, which it could be, in this case, the data of the patient level data. For example, for this case, for the patients that had this psoriasis, so we can already start accessing the data and check if there is really a correlation between taking those treatments and the severity that had these patients with psoriasis. One of the most, so now that we have the data, we can really start trying to get to our insights. But what I want to make an extra effort is into showing that things like the PASI, that is the psoriasis index and severity index, it's a scale that usually it's only written on the clinical notes. Being able to access this kind of information is what really is going to provide an extra value by using the data mediation capabilities from IOMEC. In fact, in our catalog, we can access to all the different NLP capabilities that we have, such as, for example, being able to access to the family history, so understanding that someone from their family had a colorectal cancer, or maybe we will be able to access to the staging of the pathology. So if we are talking about a cancer and their stage, and we want to be able to access to those patients that are only at a certain stage, we will be able to access to that data point by itself. So this process of using the platform really lets and enables us to be able to perform these data orders. In the case, for example, of a patient finder, this process at the end, when we go to the deliverable, it will differ the deliverables that we see as coming from industry or coming from the hospital. If I will be a physician, rather than being able to only access the data, what we will be able also, if we are performing a patient finder, is to access to a list of the patients that might fulfill the selection criteria so that we can start already enrolling them into our study. So going forward with the presentation, I'm going to go back into some of the use cases that we have been executing lately. So what I wanted to share with you is one of the cases that I think it's the most interesting one, is one where what we are trying to do is from a population of patients that have chronic kidney disease, make sure that we are able to find those that have an yet not diagnosed hereditary kidney disease. In this case, a very rare disease that it's the Alport syndrome. So thanks to this whole process, from all the 45K, for all the 45,000 patients that have chronic kidney disease, 292 of them, they already had an Alport disease that it was confirmed and diagnosed. But thanks to this process, the physicians from the hospital were able to find other 53 that right now they can enroll into their new treatments or into the clinical trials so that they can take part of it. So this is thanks to all the AI that has gone through all the clinical records, find all the data points, and once we have found those patients that fulfill the selection criteria, then we have been able to find those that yet do not have a diagnosis but are compliant with the clinical profile of the Alport syndrome. Another very beautiful case is the one that we are doing in this case with 3 hospitals in Spain, where what we are doing is helping the physicians to help to the patients access to a CAR-T treatment. In this case, the physicians are trying to identify patients who are in different diagnosis processes of, in this case, lymphoma. So they have these 3 different patient selection criteria, and now from 3 patients that they were able to recruit previously to be able to get them into a CAR-T treatment, now they are able to get more than 10 in a recurrent basis with an accuracy of more than 85%. And last but not least, I wanted to share another success story in the patient identification, where we have helped one of the hospitals from the network to be able to recruit more than 40 patients that were previously not being able to identify in another hematologic malignancy clinical trial, where they wanted to be able to recruit as many patients as possible, and using other solutions, they were only able to find 12 patients that have multiple myeloma in the whole hospitals. Thanks to our solution, they were able to make sure that they identified more than 40 and recruit them for the clinical study. So these were 3 examples of how different people have executed different mediations through the platform and how they are recurrently being able to identify patients through the platform. So that said, Rohit, back to you.
Thanks, Gabby. Thanks for that. So I've got a couple of questions to start off with here, Gabby, before we wrap up. One of the questions is regarding the AI. In one of the slides that we were showing earlier, we had where we were showing how we used checks on how the AI can check for the content and the context of the information that it's trying to decipher here. It says in the current slide, pain is written as PIN. There's a misspelling. Does the AI detect this kind of mistakes in the medical records? Typically, it does happen when clinicians are writing notes and stuff. So can you just comment on that?
Sure. So the AI, it will detect in this case that pain is badly written, and it will recognize the term equally. So one of the cool things about the latest advancements in the last 5 years, really, in how the AIs read and find patterns in the text, is that they do it in a very similar fashion as when we are learning a new language, in the sense that they recognize what you are referring to, not only by the content of the word, but also by looking what goes the 5-6 words that go before and the 5-6 words that go after that. With that, they are able to recognize really what you are referring to, even if it's badly written, which is something that happens a lot in the clinical notes. So due to the clinical practice and the lack of time during the visits, many times data is not correctly identified, and that's part of our main processes to make sure that even if it's something is badly written, if there is an acronym that they are using to referring to that, we are able to find those data points and identify them correctly. So that's mainly part of our quality assurance process, where we spend most of the time when we are trying to make sure that what we found really is the data point that is of interest.
So just related to that, Gabby, sorry, I'll let you continue, but just there was another question that's very related to this. So let me just ask that. Is there a human eye looking into the quality of the NLP? And I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, exactly. So let me bring one slide. So when we go through our quality processes, there is a verification and a validation process where both humans are behind the both processes. So behind the data verification process, what we have is a human annotator that it's making sure that we have correctly identified whatever it was from interest. So for example, here what we are seeing is that if we have a data point that has been identified by our AI and is one of those data points that it's of interest, a sample of those is going to be verified in each of the clinical centers, just to make sure that we are really finding those data points that we are interested on. So this is interesting because at the end, what we are doing is, rather than having to have a human collecting the data, what we have is a human verifying and making sure that the collection of this data by the AI has been corrected. And thanks to that, what we get is a metric of how well all the identification process was managed.
Thanks for that, Gary. The other question, I think we've got time for a few more. So who manages the process with the ethics committee?
Should I take that one?
Sorry, I was just asking as we were commenting. Yes, please comment, and then I can add my thoughts on that as well.
Sure. So so ethics committees is one of those processes that it can be taken as being part of the process of the mediation themselves. So you can request through the data order that the whole process of the mediation with the hospital includes the possibility of going through the ethical committees processes to make sure that you get the approval. Usually the ethical committees of the hospitals that we work with are trained to understand and to the technology that we use and the procedures to capture the data, so that whenever they find themselves with a mediation that it's coming, a mediation request that is coming from our platform, they already understand the context and they already know how to execute these studies, and that usually leads into a faster time of the approval of the ethical committees processes.
Yeah, that's the comment I wanted to add to this flow is that one of the comments that we made earlier around the mediation process is precisely to cut through that bureaucracy. So when we're working and having these engagements with the hospitals, we're also trying to identify who are the key people that need to be looking at these requests so that we can expedite that process. As most people on this call will probably appreciate, there's sometimes quite a delay in between requesting an approval for a project and actually getting approved. So it is something that can be managed through the system more effectively too. Okay, I think I'll take some of these, but before it was commented that IMED could be a complement to Trinetics or vice versa. Can multiple platforms coexist in a hospital? I think the answer is absolutely yes. Just to give context on that response, one of the use cases that Gabby showed was in fact a case where two platforms were within the same system, within the same hospital. The scenario is with one of the platforms, there was only structured data being mapped, and it's a platform that provides structured data on a more global basis than maybe perhaps we can do. But the challenge here was trying to find this patient population required in-depth kind of more review of data from a clinical notes perspective. So where there was no possibility to flag or find candidates for a potential recruitment at that hospital through the first platform, the same hospital then came to IMED and said, hey, do you think you could help us out, to see if we can get these candidates? And this is the use case where we actually found 40 candidates where there's a similar platform, maybe not as deep as ours, over a longer period of time couldn't identify any. So I think there's a use case for both platforms or multiple platforms to be used in a hospital. We can be very complementary. Right, where is the AI integrated or installed? Is it inside the hospital medical record system? In that case, are you approaching public hospitals, or would it be possible to have a list of hospitals where this is already ongoing, planned to be shortly? So let me take the second part of that quickly. Yes, typically there are very big reference hospitals. A lot of them are public. The hospitals we target are typically the ones that have a clinical research initiative or unit of some sort, because they are the ones that are most open to actually having a structured data in the first place and then using it with the industry for the multitude of projects that can come about. I'll hand over to Gabby about where is the AI integrated or installed.
Sure. So our solution is usually integrated within the same data governance infrastructure as the hospital. So wherever the hospital have their own systems and they manage them, our solution is integrated there. So it's up to the hospital where they have it. I must say that most of them, they have their infrastructure in-house on the same buildings as the hospital. So most of the time, our solution ends up being part of those services that are available in the hospital. And then what we do have is an external access, so that whenever a mediation is already accepted, we can go through the process of acquiring the data, capturing the data points of interest, making all the quality assurance processes, and then deliver the mediation itself.
Right. I'll take one more. So the last one is there a way to do feasibilities through the platform? Yes, absolutely. And that's one of I think we probably brushed over it very quickly, right, Gabby? But that's what you were showing when we were opening up the platform, to show that you can build and query different cohorts.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the main goals of the platform is to be able to define cohorts very fast and perform a patient count as a first approach to understand if we have data, or the data is already available in the hospitals regarding that therapeutic area, or maybe because we are looking for a very specific cohort of some kind. And then those patient counts can be transformed themselves into patient finders or patient level data, depending on the use cases that we might be interested in.
Okay, super. I think we've come to the end of all the questions we've got online right now.
Ro, could I provide a reflection? And this is a personal reflection, and I try to sort of catapult myself back 2018 to 2022, when I was leading EHR-enabled recruitment services at AstraZeneca Biopharmaceutical, and relying very much on structured data providers like Trinetics and some others. And at that time, I think that the IMS data space platform provide a new way of going deep, which didn't exist at the time. And I think that is quite powerful because it could actually provide a more faster route from feasibility to actually enrolling patients. I know how complicated it could be with other platforms because, and here's, I think, is an interesting factor, because my second point is that the collaboration model that IOMED is doing is a deep collaboration with hospital partners in a way that traditional federated EHR platform have its local installed, but they don't have that engagement. And that leads to my third aspect, that this way of IOMED's working also provides sort of a quite insightful and learning experience about sort of drilling deep in order to understand patient journeys, perhaps design support, but ultimately actually finding patients, which is not a trivial thing. And my last thing is, since I was very impressed about when I was in AstraZeneca and being the key contact person for Eden, that IOMED was a sort of a principal data mapping provider into OMOP. And I think what I was talking about, EHDS, for AstraZeneca, it could be a good way to collaborate, because EHDS has seen the way the data mediation and the data space platform that IOMED has done is seen by EHDS as a...
Okay, I think we just lost Matt there. I don't want to try and finish his thoughts off for him, but yeah, I think he was just explaining, really, I think he was trying to get towards the alignment we have with what the goals of the EHDS is. So hopefully you can connect again later, but just in the interest of time, Gabby, if you can just go to the slide with the satisfaction survey. So thank you for your time again. Before we wrap this up, I just wanted to request some feedback from you. We're keen to do these sessions with you and even in smaller groups. There is a code here for you to scan. It will take you to a page where you can find a personalized page for AstraZeneca, where we've put the presentation. We'll keep a recording of the webinar there as well. We'll have some other kind of supporting documents where you can find information and brochures on our solutions, etc. And also a request for you to come to us with any of the use cases that you might want to see here. So we appreciate that there are different types of priorities amongst the audience here, but we believe this platform can help address a lot of them with a common solution, which is the IOMED data space platform. So please take a 2 minutes or 5 minutes just to give us your feedback, your thoughts, your ideas on how these kind of webinars could improve for you, how it could provide more value for you, and we look forward to your feedback on further discussions as well. And I think that's it, really. We'll wrap it up here. Gabby, thanks again for your time this afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'll say thanks on behalf of Mats as well.
Thank you.